Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday, the patch notes have been posted, which means it's time for us to take a look at the top 5 changes of patch 14.8. I'll let you guys know what the biggest changes were on this week's patch, and what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 14.8 is the MSI patch, and as a result, it has a lot of changes that are pro-play oriented, and a lot of very small changes because Riot tend to be very conservative when they know they're balancing for a professional tournament. That said though, there are still enough things that are exciting for every player to talk about, so let's go ahead and hop right into things. Going all the way down here to the bottom to talk about the first change here, the Voidgrub changes. Now, Riot are trying to allow Voidgrubs to be a more contestable objective, but also a more valuable objective. As a result, the spawn timer of grubs has been pushed back. This means that it's less appropriate for players to say, we'll just trade Drake for grubs or grubs for Drake, whichever direction, because Drake will spawn first. This means you can kill Drake, and then grubs are still there for the taking, which means it's a little bit harder to say enemy teams on Drake, I'll just go take grubs, or vice versa. And they're also buffing the value of individual grubs. Not only are they dealing more true damage to structures per stack, but you also get your first little son summoned at 4 stacks as opposed to the 5 stacks. Now you still don't get the second Void Might until 6 stacks in total, but it does mean that you have to get fewer grubs in order to get a very, very powerful benefit, and this generally makes Void Grubs a much more interesting objective for teams to want to take, but also a more contestable objective at the same time. I really like this change. I think it's a big one for the Void Grubs. It should make them feel like a much more powerful objective going forwards. Next up, the number 4 change on this week's patch are the changes to Azir. Azir has reigned supreme in pro play for what seems like months now due to a variety of factors, and Riot are trying to make sure he's not the only champion that gets played mid lane during MSI. Now, these nerfs are small, but targeted. The health regen nerf here is important, given that most Azir players are going Grasp of the Undying. This normalizes his baseline durability and means damage sticks to him a lot more easily. And the W nerf here looks relatively small, but it is quite impactful. That 8 damage nerf is on every soldier auto attack, which will add up throughout the course of the game as general loss to DPS from this champion. Now, to be fair though, I wish Riot had hit Azir harder. I still expect him to be a very popular champion at MSI, but hopefully the general power down here will make him less overbearing for teams to deal with and maybe a little bit less of a guaranteed pick if he's open. I think these changes are good directionally. I would just hope that there was more of them moving forwards. Moving on to the number 3 change here, let's talk about the Briar nerfs. That's right, our favorite champion on this channel is back in the patch notes once again for nerfs. Now, this time, to be fair to Briar, Riot fixed a bug with Sundered Sky that had basically made it a lot weaker than it should have been, and Briar gained a ton of win rate off of that because it's one of her core items. As a result, Riot did need to nerf her in general, but also she's still overbearing in lower tiers of play because she doesn't have sufficient counterplay in her kit. That last part's mine, the first part's correct though. As a result, Riot are nerfing Briar here. Health growth is going down, the attack speed off of her W is going down, but they are compensating higher tier Briar players with an increase in the range on head rush to allow these players to a little bit better get to targets that they want to get to, or just generally get in range to use their damage. I do think that this is a buff that lower tier players will appreciate too, just being able to more easily get in range to use your damage as Briar is very important. So I do feel like these changes will generally come out in the wash, but at least I like the general direction Riot are taking this champion overall. I just feel like this won't be the last time we see her in the patch notes overall. Moving on to the number 4 changes here on this, the number 2 change here on this week's patch, it is the Mordekaiser changes. Dread it, run from it. The Mordekaiser R changes are arriving nonetheless. Now, I made a full video talking about the implications and the whys of the change here, so you can watch that if you're interested for more context. But suffice it to say, for a variety of factors, Mordekaiser's R is no longer cleansable by any means. This is something that I actually missed. Things like Gangplank W, Melio R, Alistair R, nothing is getting you out of the Death Realm once you're there. The only thing you can do is stop yourself from going there with things like CC immune or spell immune with spell shields, or just like things like Mundo passive, for example. This means Mordekaiser R is very reliable now. Mordekaiser can press R on you and know that he will get the full 7 seconds to beat you up before you both end up back in the real world. This is a big deal for a champion whose ultimate has been very inconvenient and very inconsistent throughout the last couple of years. Now, Riot are also preemptively nerfing him a little bit. He has a nerf on the damage on his E, but they're also decreasing the cooldown on his Q at early levels, so it kind of comes out in the wash a little bit. I'm excited for this change. I do think it's going to be major for how Mordekaiser feels, but I acknowledge that it is a very risky change, and I'm hoping that Riot keep their eye on Mordekaiser very closely moving forwards to make sure that there is enough counterplay to the Iron Revenant. Finally, the number one change on this week's patch are the changes to Skarner. Now, Skarner's rework came out only on the last patch, and it came with we've realized a lot of interesting and unintended things about Skarner since then. First up, Skarner's top lane experience was way too strong. A big thing that Skarner was doing is maxing W first, taking Arcane Comet, and just spamming it to slowly harass enemy champions out of lane in a very uninteractive playstyle. This is being addressed. W costs more mana, deals less damage, and Skarner's mana growth has been decreased overall to make it a lot harder for him to play this kind of playstyle. Secondly, Skarner Jungle was lagging behind his top lane performance by a decent amount, even disregarding the sort of cheesy W max. As a result, Riot are giving Skarner Jungle some decent buffs here. This is mostly in terms of the Q buffs. Q is hitting a lot harder and has a reduced mana cost, which means that Skarner generally should feel better in the jungle, and in top lane, he's going to be maxing this first now, which should make his primary trading tool significantly better. Thirdly, Riot are addressing some of Skarner's clunkiness to a very small extent. You can now hold your Q longer between auto attacks without the ability fizzling, and Skarner both picks up the rock faster and has a reduced lockout before he can throw the rock, which will be massive for his general feel, making him feel a little bit less clunky and a little bit more responsive to play overall. Fourthly, Riot have moved around to Skarner's recommended items. As it turns out, Skarner is a huge fan of Heartsteel, even in the jungle, and as a result, Riot are prioritizing that accordingly and prioritizing Dead Man's Plate, which is a very important item for the champion to have overall, and moving some things down like Iceborne Gauntlet, which is nice, but not super relevant to Skarner's general playstyle. I think all of these changes are extremely good for Skarner. I think he should feel much better to play, have a little bit healthier of a playstyle, and hopefully narrow the gap between his top lane and jungle performances. I think this champion's still in a very good spot. I think his win rate will continue to improve as players learn to play him, and I'm very happy with this change list overall, and very excited to give it a try. And that is going to be it for me today, guys. Those are the top 5 changes of patch 14.8. Let me know what you're most excited for down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.